the sand has migrated in our swim area where we usually put the chlorine docks. So we're already making preparations.
Andrew's gonna let us know. Who's our lawyer today?
He's had a baby. I mean, his daughter had a baby. Jim. First time grandfather.
Yep. I don't think so. No, we haven't.
10 pounds.
10 pounds.
Whoa.
Ready when you are.
They're ready.
And 6 feet north.
All right, they said they're ready. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll? Here.
Present.
Here.
Present.
All right, thank you. So today we're going to start the work session with an update from Aram Tertunian, First Coastal Corp., and we've got Kristen Doulos with us, our Parks and Rec Director. Why don't you come on up, and you're going to tell us about a variety of matters like the ECDs and the beach erosion and the gabions and conflog and FIMP. We could be here a long time.
It's quite a menu. Well, thank you very much, Madam Supervisor, for the invitation to come here today. But let me start by saying what a pleasure it is to work with town staff, with such professional, dedicated department heads and their staff that execute the policy of this board. It's really refreshing to have such a great group, two of which are joining me today.
Oh, Kathleen, hi. I didn't even see you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. We agree.
Says that all the time.
Yeah, I know you agree, and if you
Completely
read the
agree.
local papers, you agree even more. So we're going to start off today talking about the Sagaponic Bridge Hampton Beach Restoration Project. You have in your packet our final draft of our fifth and final newsletter of the project. We're really happy, excited, and otherwise overjoyed that we were able to complete this project. I've put some of the highlights into the outline. So this project extends from Flying Point Beach on the west end to Town Line Road on the east end, 5.6 miles. We started in February and we completed all the sand placement by April 19th. We're currently demobilizing equipment, most of which is already gone from the end of Ocean Road and Sag Main Beach. There's one piece that is still to be disassembled at the end of Ocean Road that will be gone by the weekend.
Can I just stop you for a second? Because you just glossed over the whole fact that you and Kathleen and the work that you did on getting this project to completion and all of the work you did with Fish and Wildlife and the DEC. And it was no small feat. I know it was many sleepless nights, and you're just kind of glossing over that whole aspect of this project. It wasn't simply, we did this project. There was, it wasn't as simple as it has been in years past. It didn't go as smoothly, and you guys put in countless hours and time and dedication to getting this through to completion, because let's face it, it would have been left literally a gaping hole if you hadn't pushed as you did to get it to completion. So I want to start by saying thank you.
Well, that's very gracious, appreciated. I'm sure, Kathleen and I, recently finished filing our nails down. We were hanging on to the branch quite literally for a while. But we're very fortunate that both U.S. Fish and Wildlife and New York State DEC granted us an extension past the April 1st plover date. What the contractor did was hired certified plover monitors who in the process of completing the project, there were certain exclusion zones that were set up that we had to stay 300 meters away from certain territorial plovers. And that resulted in not being able to place fill in a portion, 2 portions of the project, which are outlined on the back of the newsletter. The good news is that we're actually able to place more sand, and that sand is directly adjacent to these areas, and it's already naturally moving in to enlarge those beaches. So it really was a group effort. I have to commend both the DEC and U.S. Army Corps and their partners, Fish and Wildlife Service. They listened to what we had to say, and we got it completed. The other thing, which is that we actually got 100,000 more yards than we contracted for in what they call the pay section. So there's a certain template that the contractor has to meet. And of course, sand is moving around all the time, and they have to put in how much they think they need, and then they survey how much they actually placed. And we got 100,000 extra yards, which is $1 million. So pretty happy about that as well. So we are now in the contractors in the demobilization phase. We are in our environmental wrap-up phase, where we're doing our compliance with the environmental agencies. And then Coastal Science and Engineering in my office will be doing a final report, which we will deliver to the board. We did have a small hiccup at the end with New York State DEC, but we're in communication with them now to hopefully straighten that out amicably. And that kind of, that wraps up $22.5 million and 6 miles of beach, unless you have questions.
What, if you're looking at the whole stretch of Dune Road, I mean, are there, where's that?
Back page of the, right there, newsletter.
So what are the sections that wouldn't be covered by the ECDs?
The only section, in Southampton town, everything on the eastern part is covered. The entire village of Sagaponack and Bridgehampton and Watermill are all covered. There's a small portion that's west of Flying Point Road in front of the old Ford Estate. That was not included. The Ford Estate went from Flying Point Road to the village line, the village of Southampton line. That area was not included in the ECD.
And the Conic Land, who owns the Conic Land Trust?
Those were included, but they're not paying.
Correct.
Yeah, they were exempted on the basis of their not-for-profit status. So, and that's a really good point. The town board, let me commend everybody for kicking in. I don't remember how much money it was, but it was pretty substantial.
It was at least 500.
At least $500,000, which actually got us 50,000 cubic yards extra. And the contractor doubled that by giving us 100,000 extra. But all of this $22.5 million is paid for by the oceanfront property owners through special tax districts that the town bonds that money, and then it gets paid back over 20 years. So it's a pretty good deal for everyone. And I would point out to the board that this was the re-nourishment after 10 years. And the initial project performed tremendously well, so well that our beach won a National Beach Restoration Award in 2017, I think. And we're going to wait a couple of more years, and we're going to put it back in for another one.
What I'm trying to get at is that FIMP, apart from these, right, with the FIMP restoration, at some point then they're not going to pay for everything, and the towns are going to have to kick in, right, and the villages.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, what is there, property we're going to have to do that?
Yes. Starting on the west end, the western 1 mile of the town between the villages of West Hampton Dunes and West Hampton Beach, that's part of FIMP. And so there will be a local responsibility of 15% to the town for that, not for the initial construction, which was just completed, by the way, but for follow-on renourishment. And then the areas of East Quogue and Hampton Bays, which is covered mostly by the Tiana Erosion Control District, I think almost all the way, actually, to the inlet.
I believe so.
Yeah. So the only area in the town of Southampton that's west of Shinnecock Inlet that's included in FIMP that doesn't have a self-taxing district is that 1 mile stretch in West Hampton.
Because you're saying the Hampton Bays East Quogue is covered by the ECD.
Yes.
Okay, all right, that's good to know. And what about the section that you referenced now that the town kicked in the money for east of the canal? Would that, in the future, is that something that we'd be responsible for also?
Because it's done by the town board decides how much they want to participate in future projects. I don't think there's an obligation in, I think the language is to the extent, whatever, something like that. I think it gives the board the discretion to determine how much they want to participate.
Okay,
It's
that's
nice to
good
have
to know.
discretion.
It's good to know it's only 1 mile.
Yeah, and that group, could be organized in the same fashion as an erosion control district, provided that they want to participate in that manner. Okay, great. We'll move on to the Tiana Gabion situation. Kristen and I have been working pretty diligently on this, I would say. Kristen, just, chime in when I go off course or, help me out here. But as you know, we came last summer to this board and talked about how we would work with the Army Corps of Engineers to develop a what they call a coastal processes feature, which is tremendously confusing for us because they just call them CPFs, and we have a different title for CPF. So there's 2 documents I want you to look at. One is this document, and then the second one is this document. And so these 2 things are wrapped together. One is the FIMP Gabion project, and the other one is the Tiana Bayside Sand Fill. So with the Gabion project, we met with the Army Corps last month, and the Army Corps and the state, and they delivered to us their revised plan. So I've color-coded this to make it a little bit easier to see. But essentially, and if you take these 2 and you go like this, you get to see the whole shoreline. So the whole purpose of these features are to mimic the natural overwash process of barrier islands. So during megastorms, the ocean waters overcome the dune, they wash over the barrier island, they deposit sand on the bayside. That sand is then colonized by marsh grasses, and that's the way that the barrier island naturally widens itself and moves landward over thousands of years. The object here was to find narrow spots where that process can be augmented. And so if you'll see, the first one is almost opposite Mermaid Lane, and everything that's in that brownish orangey color, that's sand fill. That's going to be about elevation 1 foot above sea level, which is the level necessary for marsh creation. And then if you move to the second photo, you see that's the area which is the Tiana Bayside facilities are. And you can see again the brownish area is the sand fill at elevation 1. There's actually a smaller area just seaward of the parking lot where it's going to be elevation 5. And then the yellow is the slope down to meet the natural, the existing bay bottom. It's a lot of fill.
Yeah.
A lot of fill. So when Kristen looked at this originally, it was like, hold it, we got a lot of stuff going on there, and we're not sure that this is the best way to treat it. So that is the conversation we had with the Army Corps, and
Is that, and I'm sorry, Aaron, is that because of the longevity of potentially dropping all that sand and potentially, or fill, and it being lost to coastal erosion? Like, what's the...
Well, I think the bigger issue is it subsumes all of the facilities that are currently being used for recreation, oyster farming, docking, sailing, swimming, and pushes all of that, hundreds of feet into the bay, basically fills in the existing boat basin that's there. and encroaches very closely upon existing eelgrass beds.
I thought we were having a conversation about the crescents.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that is what the conversation that it took us several months to set up with the Army Corps that we had. And so what we've agreed to do is we're going to evaluate this plan. We've got the plan I presented to you last time and another one that I think actually might be better. And we're going to sit down with the engineering folks and see if that's something that we can do. So there's a small complication here, and I know we're getting into the weeds, but it's important for the board to know. At the federal level, there's something called the Coastal Barrier Resources Act, and this is an act of Congress where they identify certain portions of the beach where there will be no federal expenditures. So a portion of Tiana is in a Coastal Barrier Resource Act area, and so there can't be any federal money spent at all. Fortunately, the area where we're working in is what's called an otherwise protected area, where the only prohibition is against federal flood insurance. So the Army Corps can actually spend money to do this type of sand fill because it's a nature-based process.
So can you just go back, because people are gonna won't understand why this and this doesn't apply for over here. Can you explain why?
Well, in the first area, in the western part, which is on sheet 111, that's directly opposite Mermaid Lane. That's a very narrow section of beach. There is, I think, a reasonable need that can be identified to widen and stabilize the barrier island there. This is an area where in the past there have been overwashes from the ocean.
I mean, why this is not, why you can't apply for federal funding for this.
Oh, okay.
People won't understand why we can get funded over here, but you can't get funded over here.
Yeah, so there's a map that has been created by Congress, can only be amended by Congress, and it's called the Coastal Barrier Resource Area Map. And it's identified units, and the beach here, the natural undeveloped beach that's in the county portion is designated as one of those areas. Whereas areas that have structures in them, which is, for example, the pavilion and the residential development, those are excluded because they were developed prior to the adoption of the act. So what Congress has said is, in order to limit development on barrier islands, we're not going to provide any federal funds to undeveloped barrier islands. So we have, in this case, an undeveloped portion over here and a developed portion here. So in the developed portion, they are allowed to spend federal funds. So
how does this differ from what you gave us last time, what they proposed?
what they're proposing is just a massive amount of fill. It's going to have some pretty significant impacts on the environment. It involves a tremendous amount of bay bottom, which is in the control of the trustees via their trusteeship.
Is it active bay bottom?
Some of it is, yeah.
What about that dock that's there?
Yeah, well, the dock would
They're
be.
taking that out?
Well, their response to us when we said, you're covering up the docking areas, well, just extend the dock seaward. I'm like, well, you just also filled in the boat basin, so there's nowhere for the boat, there's no depth of water for the boats. So we just think this needs a whole bunch of reworking, and the Army Corps and the state have agreed to listen to us. I think at the end of the day, the town is in the driver's seat because the town has to issue permits, trustees have to issue permits, and the town has to agree that this is going to occur, within the boundaries of the town. But so far I don't think they, being the Army Corps, fully understands the multiple use aspect of the Tiana Bayside Pavilion. I think they're just looking at it from 30,000 feet and saying, oh, we can create a whole bunch of marsh here and that's environmentally good. And I think when we dig into this with them, especially with the engineering folks, we can come up with a much better solution.
One of the other things is that I know has been important to us is to try to figure out what to do with the gabion system. This would keep it in place. Their proposal would keep it in place and bury it under sand. And as you can see, in the fall,
If you look at this one.
there was a dredging project of the intercoastal, and they deposited sand on the beach. It's not as much as the Army Corps would put there, but you could see how that's already migrated quite a lot. And in the aerials, you could see how it moved around to eastward around the pier there, and is filling in on that side.
So it's possible if we drop all this fill, it could potentially just.
I think with the wave action is one of the concerns.
I'm concerned it's just gonna fill in that whole marsh that's to the
That
east
should
of
be,
it.
that should definitely be a comment that is brought to the attention of FIMP and New York State.
And Marty has brought this up as well, and we're gonna bring him into the mix.
They want you to create marshland.
Right.
But they also got to destroy it down the way.
I don't know, that's just a lot of sand.
It is.
So,
What is your plan to do something offshore?
no, well, my plan originally was a series of segmented breakwaters, but in doing some additional research, I'm thinking of something where we basically build on we have two ends of this project. There's a sheet pile bulkhead on the west side and the solid fill pier on the east side. And I think that if we build a structure off the end of each one of those, and then something else in the middle, it's gonna need a bunch of engineering. I think that what happens is we create this nice, wide, sandy beach, which is perfect for everything. It's got, you'll have an ability to do your oyster farming. You'll be able to walk into the water without having to walk across gabions. The horseshoe crabs will have a place to go.
So you get rid of the gabions?
Get rid of the gabions and stabilize the beach using some offshore structures.
And you can use those rocks from the Gabion. It's like
Some
similar,
of them as the base.
similar to what is on the ocean side in West Hampton, where there's
You're
the
talking about
breakwaters.
two big jetties?
They're not jetties
Not
really.
this.
They're recurved breakwaters. They're connected to the land and then curve
They
out. So
curve.
what you want to do is create this stable embayment so that the sand stays inside there and doesn't migrate out.
It traps it,
Um,
actually what the breakwaters does in front of the bathroom tennis and swordfish.
those are more jetties, but like we
Yeah,
did
same
on the
idea.
Bayside. You remember the Bayside project we did at
Yes.
in the 600s?
We don't want to talk about that. They don't work backwards sometimes.
And there's also financial implications to having to replenish the sand to the town will have to
Right.
pay for that in the
This is
future.
15% cost share.
So a year later now, this is what they came back with, just dump sand.
We need a little more coordination there. Well, what's the benefit to us in the past year is the deposition of all this sand from the intercoastal dredging. Because we're gonna get to watch how this sand moves now. And it's gonna be very instructive in both future design and also identifying these impacts that we're talking about. So,
Well, what are we gonna do about the horseshoe crabs in the meantime?
in the meantime,
The eastern side of the property still has sand over the gabion, so it's really the western portion where we might have to have volunteers moving them again.
Yeah,
the other thing is we could go to the DEC and ask them for a permit to move some of this sand. I mean, there's a lot of sand right there and cover the gabions. I mean, we have the horseshoe crabs don't come until the fall.
They usually come pretty soon, yeah. Yeah.
You got a
In
couple
fact, I'm
weeks,
surprised we haven't seen
That's
them yet.
nowhere near enough time.
because they're all moving, because the guys catching horseshoe crabs, they're all moving in close to the beach.
Oh, yeah.
And can we even move the sand now that we're in the plover season?
This,
This area usually isn't.
yeah, I mean, they just
Plovers.
created this beach. They would say, it instantly becomes plover habitat. I don't know. But I think probably for this year, the easier thing to do is to organize volunteers. I think that has a lot lower mobilization.
So you put the bulkhead, like the
This
curve
should help a lot.
on the town property right here.
Yeah, to build
Yeah.
off of that. And the same on the other end, exactly.
Years prior.
What happens to the property owners on this side?
I don't think anything because they're not getting any sand right now.
Yeah.
We couldn't have highway just bring some bulldozers down and move some of the sand over the western part
We
of
can
the
do anything we
Gabion.
want.
In the
You could
old time.
declare an emergency,
Yeah.
and
You're the boss.
Horseshoe emergency.
you could
Horseshoe
declare a
crab.
horseshoe emergency. Of course, you better talk to your attorney first. That's the geologist practicing law without a license.
Mhm.
So,
You would,
some-
you would
some-
have to, you would have to have some type of, figure what, if you're gonna have damage on either side of this. 'Cause it looks like this sand is going over here, cause this looks shallow over here.
It is shallow, but there's really not much moving there.
No.
No.
Where do you think this
This is how it
sand is
was.
going?
That sand is definitely going east. East and a
Parking
little
lot?
bit offshore, but mostly
Yeah.
east. You can see it wrapping around. We'll get some other aerials in a couple of months. We had a March aerial and an April aerial, and they were only 2 weeks apart, so it wasn't that much difference over 2 weeks. But we think in the next 6 or 8 months, we're gonna really see how that moves. And this, our timing on this ties into the overall FIMP project. And I'll talk about that when we're ready to talk about that. But
Is that a crazy idea to have you're saying that there's a lot of sand and it's covering the west part, but we need it to cover the east part for the horseshoe crabs? Is that something that
I don't
can
think it's,
happen?
I think it's actually a fine idea. I don't know what the only jurisdiction other than the town you have to deal with would be the DEC, and I think it's worth having a conversation with them.
And the trustees.
And the trustees, I'm sorry, yeah. So I think it's worth having a conversation with the DEC about, listen, this is what we'd like to do, this is why we'd like to do it, we need to do it in a couple of weeks. Are you open to this idea or not?
You could almost do it in-house, cause you could take the excavator, what we bought,
Yeah, that's what I mean.
and go on a couple of town dump trucks and just go.
So it's certainly easier than getting volunteers down there every night, right? Or is it every night to lift the crabs over the Gabion?
For a good
2
probably
weeks.
2 week period, yeah.
3 weeks.
Cornell has their facility there, so they've been really the ones spearheading it. They've been extremely helpful in coordinating that.
You
And
don't think they would just walk down and find their way back in past now?
They get caught.
Put a
They
sign.
get hung up in the
they
wire
were
too.
saying would they go this
They
way?
should never put the
Yeah.
wire. Yeah.
I mean, but, Madam Supervisor, I think it's worth a phone call to the regional director. That's my opinion.
How big are those gateways? I forget now.
They're all intertwined. They're big. I mean, their footprint, it's gotta be a dozen feet.
Yeah,
Can't
they're
remember.
big structures, heavy.
I'd be happy to write something up for you.
Are you
if would
talking
like me
about
to.
Amanda Lefton, the commissioner?
No, the regional director, Kathy Haas, Region 1.
It's a pretty long stretch. Yeah.
I mean, if it's not a reasonable thing to do, tell me now, but if it's, makes sense for, but then it's gonna interfere with your analysis of how the sand is moving.
Not enough to matter.
Mhm.
I could reach out to the wildlife people and at the DEC and ask them if it's something they'd be willing to consider.
What do you mean, in what way?
So, I mean, the regional supervisor for natural resources, Rob Marsh, who's a very, very good practical person. And I'd be happy to call him and say, this is the problem we're having. This is a, temporary solution we'd like to undertake. Is this something you guys be willing to help us with? If they say, no, we don't want you to do that, then that's a pretty easy answer. If they say, give me some details, that's a different answer.
Almost like a green light to go ahead.
Who is it you're talking about?
Rob Marsh at the DEC, he's
Oh.
the regional supervisor for natural resources.
Who is Kathy Haas?
Kathy Haas is the Region 1 director.
So you
She's in
think
charge of the whole
Rob
director.
Marsh is the better person?
Well,
to
Rob
call?
Marsh is the guy I talked to, and I think Kathy Haas is the person you talked to.
Janet Command.
Well, does anybody have any concerns about doing that? Hmm.
I would just be concerned about getting the correct depth so that we're not than
Creating a shelf.
compromising the other side.
You have the right slope for the horseshoes to come off.
This is way too steep for them right now. They'll never, but we'll see.
Oh, it's so steep right here
Yeah,
where
it's so steep.
falling
You
off.
see that right there, yeah. They may
So-
come up on that short section.
It would be helpful if we did take it from there to make it a more gradual slope.
Yes. Yeah, if we pulled it, just graded out that front area and make the slope more natural. Yeah, it's a pretty big benefit, actually.
What's the slope on it now?
It's like 1-on-2.
Wow, it's pretty steep.
Yeah, because it was
It's hard to tell
basically
from the
vertical
picture,
when
but
they did it.
it's a shelf.
Not good for swimmers to walk out there.
No, it's deep. It'll drop right off.
The last step gets you.
Yes.
All right, well, let's give it a try.
Okay, all right. I got that. I circled that as a to-do. So that brings us to FIMP. And with FIMP, we are, and Kelly Doyle, who can't be with us today, is another star in your group. And she has been working really hard on getting these acquisitions together. So the current construction schedule is for 26-27, provided we get all the easements recorded with the Suffolk County Clerk by May of 26.
Because if we don't, they'll just move on.
They'll just kick it off another year.
What do we have to have done by then?
We have to have 99 easements recorded in the Suffolk County Clerk's office.
We got, the surveys are done and the
Right.
appraisals are done? Or not
Appraisals
yet?
are not yet. So what happened is, all the surveys were done, and then we had to work out a hiccup with defining the mean high water line, which took the Army Corps 8 weeks to give us an answer. Now that's worked out. The surveys this board authorized them to amend all of the surveys so that the mean high waters on every survey matches, and it matches the Army Corps of Engineer plan. The 77 of the 99 appraisals have been completed. But
Wasn't there something too, that then they changed their mind and they wanted the interior of the
We
homes
fixed that.
appraised?
We fixed that. That was, that only took 3 months. Still can't understand why they need to see the inside of someone's house to generate the value of the beach in front. So there's 99 easements. 70 of them have been, the appraisal part of it has been completed. There's 3 pieces. There's the survey, there's the engineer's report, and then there's the appraisal. So the surveys are done and the appraisals are done. The engineering reports are now being completed because we've worked out the mean high water line issue. When the appraiser gets those 2 documents, the survey and the engineer's report, they will finalize their appraisal. What we've done is there's a group of them that are going to be completed, and every appraisal has to be approved by the Army Corps. So we have to send them to the state has to send them to the Army Corps has to approve them and then bring them back. So we don't want to do all the appraisals and finalize everything until they agree that the first couple are right. Because once the first couple are right, then the rest of them become pretty straightforward. I've gotten assurances from people in planning and from the colonel in the district that they are going to be, quote unquote, more responsive to our timeline. So we expect that within the next, 30 to 60 days, that we're going to complete this first tranche of appraisals and have them transmitted to the state and the Army Corps for their review. And then once that's in, I've been told to alert several people, and obviously we're going to alert this board, and we need to make some phone calls because we need to be at the top of the pile.
And then are the easements prepared in anticipation?
Yes. Yeah, all that language is actually on the survey itself. So once that gets approved by them, then an offer package goes to the property owners, and the property owners have the right to accept, reject, or negotiate. Then that begin. If it's an outright rejection, then we end up going to court for eminent domain.
And Can we not submit for reimbursement until the process is complete?
No,
Or
not
we,
the entire process. We can do it in tranches.
because I mean, it's now years of layout where it was supposed to be a pretty, when we started this, it was, we were doing a short-term thing and we were finding money to kind of fund it, and now it's turning into this much longer,
Much longer process.
yeah.
Yeah. There was one other thing I had to say.
So if somebody refuses to sign the easement, but we can still proceed with the project, even though we'd have to go to court with
You
a,
have to get a court order. I think Christine helped me out here, but I'm becoming dangerously poorly informed on this process. But what I've understand is that because we're the town and not the state, we can't just, if you were the state, once you file, it's yours, and then it's just a discussion of price. Whereas because the town doesn't have the same level of sovereign immunity, they have to go get a court order to that effect. So, I don't anticipate a lot of that, simply because the feedback I'm getting from the owners is,
Get it
what's
done.
taking so long? Give me something to sign.
And the value of the sand is,
And again, a little bit into the weeds, but important for the board to know. Within the project participation agreement, there is a section that allows the property owner to accept $25,000 if they sign a release of appraisal. So depending on what the value of this beach is based upon these initial appraisals that come in, if they're under $25,000, this process becomes much more streamlined, potentially, as long as the Army Corps doesn't stand in the way. But so that's an important thing. Just keep that in the back of your head, because we've gotten pushback from the Army Corps on that, but I think we've overcome it. But there's another important thing coming up regarding the project participation agreement. So that's the contract between the state, the federal government, the state government, and the 5 towns. So what happens is the feds give the state a contract. The state reviews the contract. They send contracts to all 5 towns: Southampton, East Hampton, Babylon, Islip, and Brookhaven. All those towns sign contracts with the state, and then the state signs the contract with the federal government, and that is the project. Now, we did that for the initial project construction, which is pretty easy because that was 100% federal. On the next part, which is the follow-on renourishment, the town's going to be on the hook for 15% of whatever the renourishment costs are. So what we have told the state is, well, when you send us the contract, you better tell us how much money it's going to cost us, because that's the first thing the town board's going to want to know is, what are we obligating ourselves to? So
that goes into effect when?
Once you sign it.
The 15%.
On the next, so initial construction is 100% federal. When that will occur 26, 27 on the current schedule. 4 years from then will be the first renourishment, and that will be your 15%.
It's 29, around 30.
So
But, so just for the 1 mile?
no, it's for all of FIMP within the town. So the East Quogue, Hampton Bays, and West Hampton.
Is that split 15, 15, 15 per town, or is it done by?
It's done by frontage. It's done by your project cost.
I thought you were saying East Quogue and Hampton Bays was covered by the ECDs.
Well, if the town board decides that the ECD is paying the 15%, then it's covered by the ECD.
Oh,
That's I think that's an internal discussion with the board and with the erosion control district.
mm-hmm.
Because there's also a bunch of county land that's in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, let's not forget, if they get a benefit, they get a bill. So I think, and the reason I'm bringing this up now is because Fire Island and Montauk have already gotten their beach fills. And so they want to get on the schedule for the renourishment. But the Army Corps wants all 5 towns, the Army Corps and the state want all 5 towns to sign this second agreement for the next 30 years. And, quite bluntly, what I told the Army Corps was, the town's not going to sign anything until you help us get this stupid easement thing done. So,
What is there? You said there's a deadline on that?
well, the deadline is May of 26. That's the deadline they're giving us. And my answer is, if you're going to give us a deadline and you want the town to sign this 30-year agreement, you've got to tell us how much it's going to cost.
and you've got to help us get through this first
It's
process.
not only that, like Brookhaven didn't have to front the costs for the
No,
surveys
because it
and-
was done under Feeney. The county was the local cooperator on the Fire Island work. The county fronted the cost. Yeah. So, and so with that information, now or in the future, tell me what other things I should be saying to the state and that the attorney's office, Kelly and Jim, should be saying to the state regarding the town's, willingness to participate in signing this next 30 years and what we need in return so that we can actually get our first project done because everybody else is already done.
The other towns are done?
Yeah. And in fact, the West Hampton section is done because that was just completed this past winter. So they can't get another renourishment. So Fire Island was done 2 years ago. They're coming up for a renourishment in a couple of years. They can't get that until this 30-year contract is signed by all 5 towns.
So if it goes beyond that 4 years, don't the costs then escalate to them? And their 15% that they signed on to is now bigger, or they haven't signed on
They
yet?
haven't signed on yet.
Because that's what all has to be figured out.
And if you recall what happened this winter, there was a big kerfuffle over an emergency work that took place on Fire Island. And so because they don't have the second contract for renourishment and they got their project got damaged, they had to go into the nationwide emergency money pool to get enough money to do the repairs. Well, that's going to be way harder to do in the future.
So 15%, does some of that get passed on to the villages that are impacted?
Well, again, this is going to be a conversation between the town board, the ECDs, and the villages, but, pro rata seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Those discussions, though, should probably happen sooner rather
I
than
think
later.
sooner than later. Because they're gonna come and start, saying, we want you to sign the PPA. So we need to know what our position is.
West Hampton Dunes is already under a separate
Um,
agreement, right?
no, that agreement, told the moment that they got this latest sand.
That was the last
That was the last.
confusion.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So
So
they're
that
gonna,
was, yeah, that 30-year agreement ended when FIMP became final, and they just got their initial tranche of sand. So now they're into the same pool as Fire Island and Montauk.
Do we have any numbers at what 15% may look like?
I've run some stuff, but it's all based on how many cubic yards of sand get placed on the beach. So,
What the cost of that sand
But
is every
you-
time that they do.
I'm sorry.
But you've asked, or you will be asking, right, for something much more concrete for us to consider.
Oh, yeah.
It's been suggested that that's something that the town board will need, as well as some of the other, surrounding legislatures, to just decipher whether or not,
Yeah, no, we've made that very clear. We have meetings every 2 weeks.
Yep.
We've been saying that to them for 6 months. I understand the state has come up with a calculation, but they haven't finalized it yet. But from my perspective, representing you guys, I want to know how much sand is going on which section of beach, how often, and how they're calculating their mobilization charges and their per cubic yard charge, because that's the way this stuff is done. And we know, I can just tell you that doing 1.2 million yards at $22.5 million is a bargain because the town did it, not the Army Corps.
Yeah.
The town gets it literally about, I don't know, we pay about 60% of what the Army Corps would pay on the same exact
So
project.
would it be in our interest for us to do these projects and have them pay us?
No, because the mobilization charges on these things are what kill you. It's like $5.8 million to get a dredge.
But so that's my question on that too. If they give us an amount, we just saw this project and weather and mobilization costs and, it can all vary significantly. And then, so if we're agreeing to something and there's bad weather or mobilization costs go through the roof, are we on the hook for the increases?
Well, the answer is
Yes.
every one of these projects is going to get funded by the town board at the time. You're going to sign a contract, but it's not as if at some point in the future it becomes untenable I don't think you're obligated to do
That's
it.
why my question is, can we sign a contract up to a certain dollar amount, at which point we just go, we're out?
I don't think they take that, and B, I don't think that's a good way to do it. I think the best way to do it is to really look at these numbers, because no one can predict what prices are gonna be 30 years from now, but if we look at what we did 10 years ago and what we did today, we can do pretty good on 10 years.
Aaron,
And I think that's a reasonable horizon.
is there though, if the town is kicking in the 15%, is there some sort of federal funding or grant funding that can help match?
You can't
the
match
federal
federal
funding,
funds with federal
funding.
funds.
Well, what I mean to say is there additional grants that can be applied to that if the town is, because there is I think a broad public benefit that is, coastal resiliency and, trying to, ensure our properties and assets are in decent shape, preservation of the ecosystems. I mean, I think, do you know that whether or not other types of funding could be applied to help reduce the contribution that the town would have to kick in? Or is that something contractual that has already been established through FIM's original engagement with the municipalities?
There's two parts to the answer. The first part is, yeah, there are funds available to do that kind of work. The problem is that under federal statute, you can't use federal funds to match federal funds. So if that 15% has to come from somewhere other than the federal government.
Because they're putting in, what,
50%.
50%, and then the state's putting in
35.
35. So the balance is to be paid by the towns and then the villages.
But what's really important here is to parse out pro rata who's actually paying what. I mean, you got a lot of county land within this footprint.
Right. So, yeah.
But also, I mean, there's the argument, right, that, the oceanfront homeowners should be paying because they benefit, it's their property, but it's a barrier beach, so it,
And there's a lot of benefits to go around.
Yeah.
The town is a significant
We have
property owner itself with
beaches.
the town parks and CPF properties. Another question to ask is, can you use CPF money on CPF property?
Right.
I don't know the answer to that.
It's like maintenance,
Correct.
probably
I think
can.
there, actually, on the
Not the way
town,
the statute is currently
Yeah.
written.
there's a discussion of this on the
Talk
town
about-
website. Yeah, that talks about, if, I'm going to paraphrase because I read it a while ago, but basically if it's being used to mitigate or repair damage that was caused to the property, then it potentially is eligible.
I think that's on homes or historical buildings.
No, it's on specifically on beach
Land?
restoration.
Oh.
Because,
The water
So
quality
there's-
ones or the CPF?
CPF. It's right on the town website. Somebody asked this question like 10 years ago. I was pretty surprised.
So not just general maintenance, but if something's damaged,
With something
something like
damaged.
that, yeah. Damaged by the,
So there's a lot
Wave
going on
action.
with FIMP right now, but the key is we've got to push to get these appraisals reviewed in a timely manner by the Army Corps so that we can take the step of making the offer to the property owners.
Last question that I have, Aram, that the contribution that the federal government is kicking in, is that something that can be adjustable?
Oh, it's
To-
adjustable
to-
only by federal statute.
Right. So is there any discussions, do you know, that are happening to help offset the local cost, the local contribution?
The discussion is the other way. The feds are looking how to limit what they're doing.
Okay.
But let's number one figure out what it is, and then number two, then we'll attack.
Okay.
Where we can find the money. Yeah, a lot going on there.
what should we be doing, if anything, then, to help?
Right now is to, listen, what they want is a signed project participation agreement. We need to decide what we want. I think the two most important things are cost and the easement process. If this board or others have other things they believe we should be asking for, now is the time to ask. And, to your question, other funding. So our last topic for today is the Poundquag Ocean Beach.
And we think we have some good news. Well, Kristen was there yesterday, and you know, it appears that the beach is getting wider even since this top photo, pardon me, which was taken, as you see, March 27th. The bottom photo is from October, and you can see how narrowed the beach is, especially in front of the main bathing area. You know, the narrowing kind of starts at where the vehicle access route is. I've pointed out there where the breaking waves are. I don't have to explain this to Trustee Pell because he knows it better than me.
I already know a spot to go fishing.
Yeah, I think there's a hole right there.
The bowl right there. I was gonna show Rick, but
So what happened is where I pointed out a gap, that's where the deeper water was. And that deeper water, the waves are coming across the bar and breaking and then piling up in that deeper section. And it develops a current, what we call a wave-induced current, which is basically sucking sand right off the beach. What appears to be happening now is that those sandbars have migrated onto the shoreline. So in the upper photo, you can see there's no gap, and you can see the waves are breaking much closer to the shoreline. So in coastal geology, we call this package bypassing. There's these big packets of sand that are the sandbars, and the waves, once they get close enough to the shore, the waves just drive them onto the shore in a big package, and you get a big wide beach. So our hope is that we're going to see that as the waves, as we enter May and the wind comes from the west, we see that sandbar migrate onto the beach, and it's already widening now. We hope it gets a lot wider.
I was at Tiana Beach the other day, and that one's really, I mean, look at the waves. At some points, we're coming right up to the pilings for the pavilion there.
That's always another concern. That one is part of the FIMP project, so we've been kind of waiting on that. We did do some renourishment about 3 years ago when there was a winter storm that washed out the dune underneath the pavilion. So it's, as far as I've seen, it's coming up to the beach fence in front of that system. It's not really washing out underneath. That's kind of the best we hope for right now. I was encouraged over the winter as I kept going to Ponquag that the beach hadn't widened, but you could see that the sand had built up. Mm-hmm. So that was the good first step sign. So I was very happy to see that, it appears to be widening quite a bit, because last year it was very narrow. This is our most...
At this time of the year, last year?
Yes. And it stayed that way all of last summer. And this is, our most attended popular beach, and it did result in a loss of revenue. Not that that's our only thing we worry about, but it's a big destination spot, and also for locals. So Tiana actually got a lot of action last year because people went down there. So the nice thing is we do have plenty of ocean access along the western side of Dune Road, but I am very happy to see it building up.
Sometimes this migrates too, the bowl.
It's going to be very popular, this sandbar.
Oh yeah, there are going to be surfers out there. There'll be a lot of whistles this summer.
Yeah. Yes.
But to your point about Tiana and also Sandbar, Ryan Murphy and I were able to get some FEMA funding to do some restoration there, and I can't remember the number, but I think it was about $100,000. That's still under review, but once that gets kicked free and approved, we can do the restoration and then get reimbursed.
Okay. That would be
Nice.
in the fall if we have the permits here.
But that's already part of FIM?
Yes,
So how are you able to get the FEMA funding?
because FIMP hasn't been built in that area yet, so we're still a quote-unquote FEMA engineered beach. The moment that Army Corps builds FIMP, FEMA's gone. Then we get into the Army Corps emergency PL 84.
I was just clarifying because of federal funds,
Right.
FIM, FEMA.
You're always looking for that extra dollar, aren't you?
Are we still looking at anything to help with Wozy?
Wozy's a problem. Wozy's only going to be solved with a structural solution. There doesn't seem to be an appetite for that right now
On whose part?
on everybody's part, because the problem with Wozy is that
the combination of wave-induced currents and waves are too much for beach-sized sand. It's just unstable under those conditions. You either have to reduce that wave energy and reduce the current velocity so beach sand can be stable, or you have to use much heavier sand. And the heavier sand is located in borrow area 6C, but the Army Corps doesn't want to pay to go get it. And when they first did the project, Trustee Pell, you may remember the first time they did it, which is a while ago, it lasted like 2 or 3 years. It's because they used heavier grain size sand from
It's
an
like-
offshore borrow site.
Yeah, it's farther off where the sand doesn't get tumbled as much.
Exactly.
But
When you have
still,
the fishing boats and all that kind of stuff. Argue.
it'd probably just be better to put something there to interfere with the wave energy.
There's
instead
some
of
really good
sand.
designs that have been developed over time that would really solve that problem. It's just, there's no appetite at the state level to permit any type of offshore structure like that. And the cost, you would definitely need the Army Corps and the state to participate because the cost of those structures is astronomical.
Like you could put like what they do, like the offshore reefs. You just move them in closer.
Yeah.
The fishermen will like it.
Yeah. The surfers aren't going to like it as much, but there is a way to accommodate a surf break and stabilize that beach. It certainly can be done, but I don't see the appetite. So right now, my advice is and I compliment Ryan Murphy again. He as soon as we heard about the Ponquag Bridge thing, he reached out immediately to the county and the state and said, we need a stockpile of sand because you're not coming across that bridge anymore, and we're going to haul this stuff all the way down Dune Road. That's going to way increase costs and it's going to rip up all our roads. And the state and the county said, don't worry, everything's fine.
There's plenty of sand there.
Don't worry about it, it's all good. It's like, well, that's on them.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that, when the time comes, that email will resurface, but I think the board should be aware that not just the effort was made, but the recognition that it's an issue, the offer of a solution, and we could have done it when the dredges were in the area. They can easily dredge 50, 60,000 yards and put it in a stockpile for us. They've done it in the past. They were like, have a nice day. So.
Do you have
Did that Mecox stocked it up and went up and down the beach with it.
Do you have a recollection of what some of you mentioned that there are already some good designs? Is that, what kind of structures?
They're basically what they call T-head groins. They do this on a lot of Florida inlets on the downdrift area because you just have such energetic environments. And there's basically a jetty goes out from the shoreline and then you put a T on the end of it and basically create these pocket beaches. And that just slows everything down enough that the beach is stable. So, it's very doable.
Yeah, but once you do that, you have to keep on doing it. You just can't do 1, 2 and say, okay, that's it.
You'd have to cover that whole like 4,000 feet. Basically between the inlet and Ponquag, which is almost 6,000 feet.
Then the neighbors west of that is going to say.
Well, that won't be too bad because here that sandbar reattaches at Ponquag and feeds that sand back into the system. It's really that woozy
That
gap.
big bowl.
Yeah. But in the
I think that
meantime-
bowl was caused because of the inlet.
Yeah.
When they did that jetty, they should have went out.
It definitely increased.
Oh, like a dog leg.
Yep.
How many jetties would that be to do
that-
4,000 feet?
I don't know, but
4?
yeah, something like that, 3, 4. But in the meantime, because if that's the route the board wants to take, you're talking about 10 or 15 years to get that done. So in the meantime, what we need to do, in my opinion, is that we need a more robust monitoring program of that section of beach so that when it gets, so that before it gets to a crisis stage, we can go to the Army Corps and say, you need to come in here, you and the state need to come in and fix this. Because it's part of their project. It's below project spec right now, I'm telling you that. And it's always an absolute scramble because what happens is, we get to the point where the dune is 12 feet wide and the water's coming over, and then we're like, oh, we need to do something.
Speaking of monitoring, I recall last year we did some sort of work session. I think you were involved with this, Kristen, with the cameras and the feed of some of our beaches. Didn't we look at that?
Yes.
Oh, Tom Iden came
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. Well, there are cameras up at a lot of our beaches, and the town does have one at Road H that looks in that area.
So is it possible for Aram to have access to some of that? I mean, I know some of it's public, but I don't.
The
right?
Hamptons.com ones are public. The one at Road H is on the town's
But
server.
when I say monitoring, we need beach profiles done by a surveyor.
Okay.
We don't
Now,
have
we can-
enough, I mean, we've called them in to replenish the sand so many times that you'd think that that would be enough to go to them and say, look how many times you've had to come. It's time for a permanent solution.
I think you should, I would definitely agree, it's time to start that conversation. You need to understand it's a 10-year conversation.
And why is that? Just because that
It's
takes.
the inertia of the agency. But the other, so beach profile monitoring by a licensed surveyor, the county has a system that can do that, and the county's got a lot at stake down there. I mean, that is in fact county parkland. So, I think it's quite reasonable to go to Suffolk County and say, hey, listen, you need to be doing beach profiles and generating a monitoring report every X months.
Because you would need that if you're gonna go forward. for-
Exactly, because if you're gonna go to the Army Corps and
You need
say
the
you're
data.
below project spec, you've gotta have a licensed survey that shows that it is.
And Welker.
Is
Okay,
the county actively participating in the FIMP process on Dune Road?
I think, I'm pretty sure they're a
They are.
signatory.
Because the majority of the property is theirs.
Well, you know what they say, the journey of 1,000 miles, right? So you gotta make that first step.
Gotta start somewhere.
Yep.
These aren't new problems either.
No, they're not new problems, but I think, especially with Woolsey, because there's a lot of infrastructure at stake down there, and any breach in that area is gonna have far-ranging consequences, both environmentally and economically.
Commercial fleets there.
Yeah, so,
Know that.
yeah, you know that. So I think the county has actually been a pretty good partner, I gotta say. The last couple of emergencies, they've really stepped up. I mean, they showed up with people, equipment, they had their top, people down there. I mean, the chief engineer, Bill Hillman, was there. He's
County
retired
executive
now.
showed up.
What's
The
that?
county executive
The
showed
county
up.
executive showed up. So I think that, reaching out to them makes a ton of sense. They know they've got stuff at risk, and I think that's a good partnership.
Do you think, though, that you would have enough to at least make the initial ask of the Army Corps without that, and then have them come back and say, no, we need you to submit some monitoring that takes place over a certain year's time? I mean, couldn't you, based on what's happened in the past and how they've had to come out and?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, we can do that. Yes, we can make a request. The way the process is, the request goes from the town to the state to the Army Corps. And we can make the, and my suggestion is you pull the county in because that gives you more weight. And say that the project is under spec, and we want you to come in and evaluate an emergency project, and we want you also to look at a longer term solution. The answer to that question is yes.
Okay.
Might be the way to go.
Is that a letter I'm drafting for you, Supervisor?
I'd like that. Does anybody have any?
Yeah.
I think that's a.
I'm fine with it, because someone has to
You
start.
don't know until you
If
just
not-
try.
Kristen will be back here right before she retires and ask her for the future.
You never know how, well, you might just hit it right at the right time.
You never know.
And if they come back and ask for the survey, we can do it,
Exactly.
or we can do it in the meantime.
And I think the county has data. We could, I'll reach out to DPW and see what they have. Maybe they can give us some more ammunition.
On that note,
Yeah,
Anything
let's
else?
outline, what the good steps would be. in order
Sorry,
to
get
get the
this
most
comfortable
powerful
silence.
letter and request out there. If it's meetings with Charlie Bartha or, however, whatever you think,
Yeah,
just
definitely.
let's brainstorm.
I'll definitely reach out to Charlie. He's top notch. So, if that's all the questions, I want to say thank you again to town staff on the Sag Bridge project. Kathleen Murray, everybody knows she's a superstar, but there was, such incredible cooperation. The town trustees, Chip Marin was there all the time. He was on every meeting. The village Sagaponic was there. We in the wrap up, Kristen was there in the very beginning, helping. It was whatever you need, and that was that's. I can tell you as somebody who's juggling all those balls, when I have people are saying yes to me, it's really, really good. And then at the end, when we had to wrap it up, PD, Chief Kiernan and Charlie McCardle on Highway were like, whatever you guys need to get that done, get it done. So that was really good. And of course, Marty Shea in the very beginning helping us with the permits. But the one thing that nobody ever mentions is the comptroller's office. So I want to say thank you to them because getting the checks out the door is pretty important with the dredgers.
Yeah, we got top-notch team in there too.
And I want to thank the town board for their support, 10 years ago and today. This is a marquee project. And when you go and you look at the sand on that beach, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between what we put there and what was there before. It is amazing how well the sand matched.
Very cool.
Well, thank you, Aaron. We
And
couldn't
that
have done it without you.
wasn't by coincidence. I think this board missed the whole profiling and taking samples. And...
Well, we're just digging holes on the beach. That's what we like to do.
Well, thank you for your guidance throughout and always being here for us.
My pleasure.
All right, good update.
Hopefully the next town board in 10 years, will be thanking the town board.
Yeah.
10 years,
From 10 years ago, right.
I'll call you just to circle back on what we.
And if we're thanking everybody, we should
I've got
probably
some
thank the
notes. I'll
governor's
write 'em up.
office and Congressman Malola's office for their help. And
Well, thank you. And I was remiss, and that is really important. I happened coincidentally, there was a good coincidence here. I happened to be in Washington at at my annual coastal conference. Oops, sorry. And when all of our extension needs were taking place, and I reached out to Lolota's office, and they could not have been more cooperative. And I'm pretty sure we got 30 days from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife because of the assistance of his office. And also the supervisor, and I know you reached out to the executives, the Albany Executive Office, and all of those things are. It's. I can't tell you how important it is for me and people in our position to know that we have the support of people like you and the congressman and our other elected representatives when we go to these resource agencies, that they understand this is really important.
yeah, it became, if you know somebody, call somebody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I love that your folder says 2023 on it.
What?
It's now 2025. 2 years of sweat and tears.
We are.
Thanks, everyone. All right, so our next topic is the Jackson Avenue redevelopment plan capital project update from Nick Jimenez, our capital projects manager. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
That's okay. That's my fault. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nick. You're welcome. Always glad to see your paperwork.
So what you have is a brief summary of the proposal and then the actual proposal, the abbreviated version of it behind there.
All right.
Anybody wants a full copy, I can send you a link to a folder on the town server, but it's like 30 megabytes, too big to email.
Wait 1 second, please. Let me just get my- more second. Why don't you start from the beginning? This is something that the town had looked at previously.
Sure. So over the years, many town boards have looked at the Jackson Avenue complex and thought, hey, we should do something to better consolidate these uses and to improve the area overall.
We all know that the Justice Court needs to.
Yeah, the Justice Court
Needs
was set
a new
up
building.
on temporary portable buildings, if you will, 20 years ago now, with the intention of eventually building a court 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So there have been master plans and ideas kicked around over the course of those 20 years that have not come to fruition. So
The police department's outgrown their building.
the police department is busting at the seams themselves. I'm sure we all know the highway office is a small, tiny little building.
Yeah. So
and-
you dusted off the old.
So we dusted off the
plans.
old, yeah, we dusted off the old master plan from the 2000 aughts. And it had some very ambitious design recommendations, moving the transfer station, creating some tunnels underground between buildings and what have you. And in discussions with you guys, obviously that was not something that the current board wanted to pursue. And you recommended we look to refresh that master plan with a new master plan that meets today's and the current requirements of the town.
Mhm.
So
And
that's.
you did. You provided all of us with a list of things that could be considered. And before you went out with an RFP, not an RFP, but you went out and contacted some firms.
Yeah, we contacted 4 local firms. I worked with land management because it's more of a planning function at this point than architecture or engineering. Obviously, architects and engineers will be involved, but it's a master plan. So it's looking, a macro view of the facility as opposed to a micro view. We're looking for massing diagrams of where this facility could go and where that facility could be placed, as opposed to what the actual architecture of those facilities are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So big square and rectangular boxes as opposed to refined architectural
Yeah.
designs.
As though it were a blank slate.
As though it were a blank slate. So, part of this would be consolidating the court and the police department into a justice center, consolidating as much as we could the maintenance garages and uses over there. There is obviously plans for a water resource recovery facility that we could tap into. We're hoping to do obviously green infrastructure, solar, biodigester, central cooling plant for the whole facility, and really just clean it up and make it, walkable, possibly a new administration building for whatever town functions the board, deems fit to be, relocated over there. And make it walkable, make it secure, where you have separation between employees and the public, both in parking and within the buildings, and a couple other amenities within those buildings and facilities as well. So circle back, that was all discussed back in February. So in February, I reached out to 4 firms, Arcadis, Ramble, AECom, and VHB. We received 1 proposal back from Arcadis. Ramble offered to act as a subconsultant and put us in touch with an architectural firm that they thought could have done a good job. We declined that offer. And then, of course, AECom and VHB declined to provide a proposal at all. So I've reviewed Arcadis's proposal. It's impressive, to say the least. They're putting in my opinion, they're putting a good team together. Everybody has experience in master planning, just overall facility design for a very wide array of projects. Cities, mixed-use facilities, there are some Suffolk County Municipal Complex Master Plan. U.S. Food and Drug Administration, again, another university. Those are all outlined, again, in the sheet that I gave you. They're further detailed in the proposal here. The most impressive aspect of the proposal, which I couldn't detail on my own, you just have to, read it for yourself if you're interested, is the method statement, where they actually outlined how they would go about conducting the development of the master plan. I found it to be very in-depth.
What page is that on?
The pages aren't numbered, but it's towards the end. I mean,
Method
it's the last, method statement. And if you get through their entire method statement of how they imagine undertaking this project, it elapses around 6 months, approximately 23 weeks, if I round it up, called it 6 months. And that's aggressive. There's a lot of work that's going to be required on the town side, of course, working with the consultant in terms of getting them information on the facilities, who works in the facilities, what type of new facilities is the town interested in, who's going to work in those new facilities, and where best should those new facilities be sited at the campus.
Yeah, they'll need to know specifics
need to
about
know
employees, how many in each building. Mhm.
Exactly. To get that, again, those massing diagrams and just a square foot.
Nick, as you know, we've been talking a lot with the animal shelter. They're going to be undergoing some upgrades. Would that be, I know that there's been some discussion about the shelter and individual conversations with the shelter. Would that be included in any of this, or this would be more focused on a comprehensive?
So the shelter is technically part of the Jackson Avenue complex.
And we own the building.
And we own the building. So yeah, it would definitely be part of this master plan, whether the shelter is recommended to stay in its current position or perhaps, construct a new shelter.
So they'll look at it.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, the only items that currently exist out there that we pretty much excluded were the park. So we're not going to rip up the new pickleball courts, the basketball courts, the turf fields, or the skate park, and the hockey rink as well. So those would stay on the easternmost extents of the park. But a major part of this is tying the new facility and the new campus into that park via either walking trails or some type of interconnectivity, so that if residents came to take care of business at town or at a town facility, they could then enjoy the park afterwards, vice versa.
Right. That's great.
So with that, we're ready to recommend that the town contract with Arcadis to get this project moving and kicked off. Their proposed fee for all design or all services is approximately $375,000. Of which we have $471,000 for the project.
And this is because there was already a project line in the
Correct.
budget.
Yeah, Jackson Avenue Facility Planning Study is an existing capital project back from the former supervisor's tenure, and that had the $471,500 available. So it was towards the end of Supervisor Schneiderman's time here, and it just never really got rolling. And then Maria picked up the ball, and we're going to start it rolling again, hopefully.
Nick, does this include, I know we talked about the PD, but I know that they had started some planning a while ago. I don't know if that's a separate line, or would that be included in this?
So the PD capital project is separate from this.
There's like $4 million there, right?
There's $4 million in that. For PD, I'll change gears a little bit. We think you guys approved either Tuesday or maybe next Tuesday, you'll hopefully be approving the hiring of Nelson and Pope to design a new HVAC system for the police department, new ceilings, lighting, a whole building standby generator, and upgrades to their electrical system.
But will they be talking together, because they're at Jackson Avenue too, are they gonna be?
So this master plan, in discussions with the supervisor and obviously a couple of you guys, would be to,
And the chief.
and the chief, of course, yeah, would be to, I don't want to say design, because we're not, the task here is not to design, but to scope out a new justice center. So the justice center in some way would be half court, half police station. However, those two would be combined. So you would no longer have PD on one side of the facility and the justice court on one side of on the other side of the facility. You would have hopefully one facility serving
They
both
can't be-
purposes.
They can't be connected.
right?
No.
So there's been, I've heard that before, and then I've heard the other side of that before. So I don't want to argue or litigate that now. I'll have the consultant point to exactly why that can't happen and
Yeah.
how we can best accommodate that. If they do have to have physical separation, they can still be next to each other and combined through some way where there's some sort of a connection that will keep
Freeze
people
frame.
out of the elements if they have to go from one to the other.
But that $4 million for the police department, there was a whole design done and it was ready to go. Like, we were ready to start construction on it, correct? We were adding a sally port, we were doing some expansion.
No, we weren't ready for construction. We had gotten to the point where we agreed on the floor plan in theory. The police department was kind of lukewarm on it the whole time. They still didn't think it was going to be enough space for them. So in discussions with chief and the lieutenant over there, we've decided, or the board has decided, to hit pause on that project, use the existing capital funding to do these improvements to the existing building with the expectation, because we all know that court building is not going to last forever.
Yeah.
So do this study, scope out the new Justice Center, and that, I believe, is the board's intention, that would be step one before we start looking at combining maintenance uses, building additional administrative buildings. It would be to build the actual Justice Center for the court.
But so my question is, like, why are we putting all of this money in? I know, I understand, like, right now, the the police department doesn't have, like, their heat is not functioning properly. The bathrooms don't, like, these are all things that have to be done. But how much money are we putting into that building to potentially build a new building?
Well, but
The police department.
Yeah.
weren't you saying you could use the building for something else?
Yes.
It's not, that building's not gonna get demolished after
No,
all
that
these
building wouldn't be coming
improvements.
down. So this is going to take some time, and we explained to the police department that this would take some time, and they were agreeable to doing those renovations to the existing facility, the existing police station, living with the existing police station for a couple more years while this gets up and running, and then eventually transferring to the Justice Center when the Justice Center is built,
If there's a Justice
if
Center.
there's a Justice Center.
Nick, the 471,000. That's what's included in that. And I know you have it listed here, but is it just the plan?
$375. That's the amount of money we have on deposit, and that's how much it would cost.
Yeah, so 471 is the existing capital account. That's the
So
budget.
the 375. So what is that? That just includes a plan.
That's a master plan scoping the facility, working with the various town departments to actually flesh out what will become,
And they'll
what
just
can become.
what that will lead to some sort of schematic.
Yeah, so that'll give you the master plan. So hopefully the board and the respective departments that'll be directly affected will agree to whatever that master plan becomes. And then once we actually have that master plan in place, we will go out to an architecture or an engineering firm to start designing the facilities, whichever facility that the town board elects to construct first, which I assume would be the Justice Center.
But when you say blank slate, it's not really blank slate, because the building that's currently the police department would still be there.
Yes, the police department would stay, and depending on how everything shakes out, the central garage could theoretically stay. But the Parks Maintenance Administration building, if you will, is a temporary trailer, so that would be removed and put somewhere else. Obviously, the Justice Court temporary buildings, those will be removed and put somewhere else. The Public Safety Building, it will be put out to bid to be demolished within the next month, so that'll be gone before this starts. All of the trustee maintenance, we hope to somehow condense the trustee maintenance, the parks maintenance, and even the central garage maintenance into one or two buildings where they can share certain tools and services and amenities within those buildings. So picture from the Public Safety Building north, completely redesigned, reimagined Jackson Avenue. There's some discussion about, and again, that's what this will explore, about getting rid of Jackson Avenue. Perhaps Jackson Avenue is removed and Red Creek Park becomes the entrance to the whole facility. Perhaps there's a new entrance. There's discussions to purchase properties to the immediate west of Jackson Avenue. Perhaps we, again, remove Jackson Avenue and have the entrance directly off of Route 24 That's what this study is going to analyze. What are the pros and the cons of doing those items? And what are the effects of doing those items, of course? So, question.
Can that $4 million for the police department, I mean, minus what you need to do to, repair the issues that are existing now? Well, I guess this is a Dorothy question. Could that be used towards construction of the new police department?
So my understanding is that most of that money is bonded money, and it is specifically in the bond resolution slated for the existing police department. There may be some magic Dorothy can work since police department to change that, but that's my understanding right now, that it's for the existing building. So we do have a nice budget to fix that place up for them.
That's what I mean. I mean, if we're gonna put millions of dollars into that building,
So again, the police department, right now, that's the police department. They have nowhere else to go. Should they vacate that into a new justice center, a new police department, on the other side of the facility, built to suit their needs at that time, the current building can be repurposed into either office space, storage space, but
There's also the public safety building.
Public safety is
That's been
that's
vacant
coming
for a
down.
long time.
Is that being demolished soon?
yeah, within the next month, it'll be going out to bid, and then
Can I ask you
hopefully
a
within the
question on
next
that?
2-3 months, it'll be down.
Not changing the subject.
Sure.
On that, could we demolish it ourselves in-house? Because we have the equipment now.
I would have to speak to the highway superintendent and see if they're comfortable. That's a bigger building. It's got a basement.
Okay.
So it's a little more involved than taking down a residential structure.
Yeah.
But if we do have the equipment, if he's comfortable assigning his employees to do that, sure. Between highway and waste management, we could work together, take buildings down. That's without a question.
It's good to know.
I mean, the chief said to me that he wasn't comfortable with the design. He wasn't
He
ready
just
to
wasn't
do it.
happy with it. After many iterations, he felt it still wasn't going to be enough space.
But that he did say he needed, like you pointed out, the heating is bad and the bathrooms and,
Yeah, so
are we
the
putting an
building,
elevator in that
so
building?
for him to,
excuse me?
Are we putting an elevator in that building?
Not, that was part of the design for the expansion, but it's not. At least I haven't considered that yet. I could consider it.
Oh, because
But yeah, so the biggest issue in the police department right now is that heating. Heating and cooling, frankly, because they have issues in cooling in the summer and heating in the winter.
It's like the town hall.
well, the heat in their conference room, if it's either on or it's off, and it got. I
It's like
went
a
there
sauna
Monday for
or
a meeting,
it's
and
an
it
ice
was like,
box.
if anybody needs a cut weight, go sit in the conference room because it was like 95 degrees.
It's not different.
But to go back to the Jackson Avenue study, again, I came here to brief you guys and hopefully get your blessing to move forward with Arcadis. If you're comfortable, they're also the consultant working on the Riverside Water Resource Recovery Facility.
So this was we just went out to.
Yeah, I worked with Janice. I asked Janice for some planning firms. As opposed to going out to the whole world, we were trying to fast track this a little more. So she recommended the 4 planning firms. 2 declined, surprisingly, and like I said, Arcadis obliged us and submitted a proposal in Ramblehead, just different designs that we weren't, at this point, we're not ready to hire the architectural firm that I feel is going to try to steer us towards designing actual buildings. I don't want to get bogged down with nuance of building elements. I just want a box saying, based on the usage that you've told us you need and the number of occupants that would be in this building, we say a facility of X amount of square feet is appropriate. And then that would be given to an architect. We need this type of facility for this type of use, and it needs to be at least this square feet. And then they would actually design that.
but they'll look at the road layouts. I mean, they're not just putting boxes on a piece of paper.
No, it'll how to connect those, how to best
Site
connect
plan.
those boxes and how to best redevelop the whole site. Does the highway yard stay on the west side of Jackson Avenue? Again, like what?
We also have some pretty severe clearing restrictions there, right?
Yeah, so there's significant clearing restrictions that we hope will be alleviated by the purchase of the properties on the west side of Jackson Avenue now. So the one to the south for the water resource recovery facility and the one to the north, we're hoping, I don't know, train myself, right? It's a dirty
I know,
word to say
instead of
sewage treatment
STP.
plant now. And the one to the north, we hope we can then use to offset the clearing restrictions at Jackson Avenue complex. And Jackson Avenue, if nobody knows, it's made up of a conglomeration of like 3 different tax map numbers. So if and when we do own the properties on the west, they can then again be all aggregated. So the clearing limits, it's my understanding, would be raised.
I think that the Pine Barrens Commission will be so thrilled with the amount of acreage that we're preserving.
Exactly.
They'd give us a little grace on needing to clear some property.
Yeah, plus, to be honest, the most of Jackson Avenue is cleared to begin with. There's some areas of trees, but it's like scrubby bramble and underbrush with some pitch pines. So if we can work around the pitch pines, great, and then we can clear underneath them. That's
Well, if
always
the pine beetles come through in the
and then they'll
meantime.
fall
you
over anyway, right? That's where I'm at. Any other questions? I'd be happy to meet with somebody or answer them. Or...
Yeah, I'm just a little concerned about Red Creek Park itself, because we've had options in the past to put in a pool. There's been talk of an indoor facility being built there. So I don't really want to choke off what we have.
Okay.
And if we can give it, if, say, the animal shelter did relocate, that could be a building for Parks and Rec. And even the, the junkyard that the police department has behind there could be more park space.
Okay.
So if
Yeah,
anything, I would try to move, highway across the street, totally, offices and all. And I think we had talked about the Justice Department being closer to back towards the dump, the transfer station.
So that's what's
The original
great
plan.
about having a consultant like this on board to develop the plan, because they can come in for a work session and receive a comment like that, and it'll actually, it'll drive their looking at the actual property to say, okay, we need to preserve some parkland over here for expansion of Red Creek, so let's start shifting to that. And then that, just thinking about it, that talks to removing Jackson Avenue as it currently exists and creating some other type of access into the park, into the complex, excuse me.
That's all I have.
I think it's a good idea because we have the money, we have, looked at it before, didn't, get
Yeah,
a
it's been
plan that
20
was
years
acceptable.
since we looked at it, and the last plan was talking about relocating the transfer station to the far, where the compost is now, to the far north, which was pretty ambitious.
Will their plan come with estimated costs?
Yes, it will. Order of magnitude, not detailed, but yeah,
Yeah.
it'll come with
Will
estimated.
they even come with sequencing as to,
Yeah.
really?
That's the whole, like, how, I should have brought an actual copy of the RFP. So it's what to do and how best to do what needs to be done, and then how much that costs.
Yeah, like, okay, you have to build a new justice court before you get rid of the old one, that kind of thing, and then what building makes sense to do next?
Yeah, so if the new justice court is proposed to go where the current justice court is, how are we going to accommodate, how are we going to accommodate operations in the justice court while it's demolished and rebuilt?
Yeah.
So then that's something that you would think they would look at. Well, let's not put the new justice center where the existing justice center is. Let's build it here so that this can operate. And then, yeah, it's like moving pieces on a chessboard almost.
I think that's great that they're gonna think through it to that extent.
And that's outlined in their document here pretty thoroughly. So, am I right to assume you
Yes.
guys are comfortable moving forward?
I am.
I am, I'd like to see the resolution and we can vote on it then.
I think we should all sponsor it.
Cindy, do you have any really overarching concerns about going and, just getting the, a plan that we can work with?
Yeah, no, the police department and the justice court have to be priority one on anything we do. So.
Absolutely.
And I'd love to have a discussion. If you know anything else, I've talked to Chief Kiernan, but if there's anything you know of that needs to be or should be replaced or fixed at the police department now, let me know. I'm all ears, because we have a very aggressive budget to go in there.
To put the money into the building, it's a lot of money put in the building, but it's desperately needed, and, they decide that they definitely deserve to have functioning restrooms and, heat that, keeps the building at a comfortable temperature and, so.
Yeah.
We're trying
and
to
this
work.
is gonna take a little while, so we gotta do what we need to do for them in the meantime.
Yeah, we're trying to work from the top down at PD. So we know they need a roof. They have roof leaks all the time. We know they need heating. And then because of the roof leaks, the ceiling tiles are disgusting and rusted and everything else. So
Mold.
roof, not mold, but brown. Roof, ceiling, HVAC, plumbing, and again, the backup generator, because when you do the new HVAC, it'll be an electric HVAC. So if the power does go out there, they need to be able to operate the police station. So that's how that ties in.
We were gonna have to do this anyway for their building,
Yeah,
right?
this was all
Even though
gonna-
we were
correct.
expanding it.
This was all going to be done, so we kind of we just did a 180 on on that project. We were going to expand the building and make everything nice in the new expanded part, and then go into, once everybody moved out, go into the existing building and do the rest, or at least whatever wasn't touched with the expansion, which would have obviously been ceilings and paint and the roof.
So now we're just doing the
We're doing
upgrades
that
first.
correct. And we, frankly, because we did the 180, and we always knew that once that new expansion was done, we would need to fund the improvements for the existing building. If
Yeah.
for whatever reason, the board says, this is all well and good, but we're not gonna put PD in a new building, we can always go back to expanding PD later.
So what would this, what do you have that you said's coming? Is it a resolution to go out to bid for those?
No, it'll be a resolution to award a contract to
We already did
Arcadis.
go out. No,
Yes.
not this one, the one for the PD upgrades.
Oh, PD will be a resolution to hire Nelson and Pope to design those improvements. So I need a design for the HVAC system, and I need a design for the generator. And then part of the HVAC system includes obviously the ceiling grid, because it'll be the cassettes. I don't know if there's no cassettes in this room.
Okay.
And then lighting, because the lighting there too is kind of depressing.
How
Yes.
they getting by all this time, jeez.
Yeah, it's a
Work in progress.
work in progress. There's
They've been waiting for us, a new board.
Oh, Bill.
that.
All right, well, thank you, this is great.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
You're welcome.
All right, that brings us to the supervisor town council member liaison updates. You ready? You want to start?
I attended Saturday evening. I attended the Hampton Bays Fire Department installation dinner, where they recognized District Secretary Dave Van Scoy. He served 13 years as a fireman, 20 years as commissioner, and 29 years as district secretary. And they also, which was a surprise of the night, they honored our town ordinance inspector, Gustavo. You all know Gustavo. Gustavo started. He's now in code enforcement. He was the 2024 Dave Powers and ex-chief Artie Brown 110% award recipient, which was, it was nice to see him honored there because he, obviously we all know he gives that at work as well. So he was very deserving, and he's had a lot of family things over the last year that he has still, gone to all his fires, and he is an active member at any fundraising event. So it was nice to see him recognized. It's always nice to see somebody and somebody is deserving recognized.
They had some nice pictures of that.
Yeah, and then was it Tuesday night? Supervisor, you and I? Oh no, Wednesday night. What night was that? Youth court swearing in. Is it
I
Monday night?
think it was Monday night.
Monday night.
Yeah.
Monday night, we attended the youth court swearing-in ceremony. Judge Gunn was there to swear in the new members of youth court. Councilman Martell and Supervisor Moore and I were able to give a little bit of, I think we got graduation cords and a pin and a proclamation or certificate to the seniors in the program.
Mm-hmm.
It was nice to hear from some of them.
There were so many of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of kids involved in that program, and it's really great to see, and and how they explained it, and how it's taught all of them to be, empathy, and it's a great program, and I'm proud of us as a town that we have that program, and thank Tracy Colson at Youth Bureau and Karaback and
And Alexis Catalano, she's our new youth coordinator
Yeah.
counselor. She put a lot of work into pulling that together.
Yep.
Yeah, it was another group that was almost the victim of COVID. The membership went down to almost nothing during COVID, so it was really good to see it rebound.
Yeah.
Yep. And the Great East End cleanup is this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. So a lot of groups are signed up, which is great to see. That's all I got.
All right, thank you. Michael, do you have anything?
Yeah, just on Earth Day, I went over to Long Beach really quickly. They were doing a cleanup with Surf Rider, legislator Ann Welker. Her office was there. Dave Dayton of Long Pond Greenbelt. A lot of folks came out to volunteer and clean up the beach. It was very nice. Also, last week or so ago, I went to the police department with Chief Kiernan and our CTV team to film what is to become our up-and-coming PSAs. A key recommendation in the Traffic Task Force final report is to also put out PSAs on our website, social media platforms, and our Sun TV forums so that people are aware of some of the rules of the road. So we're going to be putting those out very soon. And also this Saturday, come join me and Bill, as well as some other folks, the Southampton Animal Shelter Foundation for Adopt a Pet Day at 11 a.m. At the animal shelter. So we hope to see you there. You can come foster a pet or adopt one.
Nice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
See, yesterday I went to the Southern Pine Beetle Symposium that they had in Riverhead at the community college, that the county executive was there, and he had put together a great panel. There were people from the DEC and the Pine Barrens Commission and the state representatives of the U.S. Forestry, and they just gave a very comprehensive explanation of when the pine beetles got here and, the damage, the wreaking havoc on the pine barrens, and a little bit about what we can do, but it doesn't seem as though, we're going to be able to get rid of them. They just have to thin out some of the trees so that they don't go from tree to tree. And, they give off this scent that when they're attacking a tree that calls all the other beetles. So if there's more space in between the trees, apparently they wouldn't be able to communicate as well. So that's why the thinning will work. And, there were a lot of people from the community there too with questions. So it was nice that they did it. I appreciated all the information.
Well, I reported on the blacktops, all the projects, the highway a few nights ago. But I've been working on the Bel Air and Hampton Bays. I'm behind schedule, so I apologize to the people in Hampton Bays. I hope to have, in the near future, maybe another 3 or 4 weeks, have a plan. Once I bring it to the town board and they like it, then I can go out to the community and get their opinions on it.
Mm-hmm. We did look at some renderings,
Yes.
right? Mm-hmm.
Pretty much narrowed down to 2 pieces,
Mhm.
two different plans. But and a lot of people have been waiting for that for a while.
Yeah,
But I just
be
want to
very
know.
nice.
It's still in our focus.
Thank you.
So last night, Supervisor Moore and I went to the EMS Advisory Board, and Bill, on behalf of us, we're going to ask you to ask the Highway Department when they're paving to make sure they contact emergency services. Sometimes it goes through the police department, sometimes it doesn't, and then it filters down to them. They had issues with getting people to the Hampton Bays ambulance barn because of the paving and the closure of the road. So if you could put that in a little note to them.
Yeah, that's pretty easy.
It was interesting last night because we got to hear from Stony Brook Hospital about their new emergency center in East Hampton and the criteria it takes on whether you take them to East Hampton or bring them to Stony Brook, Southampton. And we learned a lot. I mean, there's enough abbreviations to choke a horse when you go to one of those presentations, but it's very interesting to me on how they decide once you get in an ambulance where you actually go. whether it's a trauma center or a level 1 trauma center. So very informative last night.
And they had the pictures of the different injuries, which some of them were hard to look at. I know.
So you keep looking down.
I know. If it's an amputation, don't go here, go there.
So luckily in that building too, a few nights earlier, I had taken the Narcan training again there, sponsored again by Stony Brook Southampton Hospital. I think it's something that I'm going to try to put together a Narcan training date in the ambulance again. I want to try to get my coaches and neighbors and all that to take the Narcan training also.
I think that's
So that's
a good
something
idea.
we'll be working
yeah.
on. You know, I got a few requests. When I was here a few years ago, we did the native seedling giveaway, and it seemed like something that was incidental to me, but I was surprised the first day we had it how many people actually showed up for the native plantings. And I've gotten a few people noticed I'm back on the board, said, hey, I remember, and they're growing great, and I want to try to do that again. So I'm going to try to get that into the budget again. And on the Great East End cleanup, you know, you have all the people here that have been putting it together for years. So thank you to Christine for putting that together originally. I took it over from her, and Cindy took it over from me. It's a great event. You know, 500 plus participants, and I'll be jumping around on Sunday trying to catch up with a few of the groups.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Cindy, for getting the word out on that so consistently. I'm glad to hear you get a good turnout.
And thanks to Paula
Fire
for
districts are the same.
all the work she did in coordinating
Well,
everybody.
speaking of which, happy Administrative Assistance Week.
Meet with Charlie
And
tomorrow.
to everybody in that role in Town Hall, we really appreciate everything they do. I know I certainly do for the people in my office. All right, well, if that's it, then I move to go into executive session to discuss acquisitions and confidential legal advice and then close.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.